welcome. My first question today simply asked, what are some of your favorite Broadway musicals? If you don't know already, I am a huge fan of musical theater and theater in general, and I try and take as much advantage as I can of the fact that I live in New York City. Now, I am a bit biased towards certain shows as I've performed in a number of musicals and teched a number of musicals over the decades, and that's why Sondheim's Into the Woods is probably number one on my list. And a close second is Merrily We Roll Along for similar reasons. I also really dig Hair and A Chorus Line and Gypsy and some smaller musicals, but really, if it's done well, I'm gonna like it. On a side note, I'm going to see Hedwig in a few weeks, and I'm really excited about that, so I'll let you know how it is. My second question was pretty lengthy, so you guys can read it down here, but it basically asked what I thought about image becoming a part of music and when the image becomes more important than the music. Let me get this out of the way first. Image has always been a part of selling music. Whether it was Elvis, Buddy Holly, or even Josephine Baker, the way they looked and the way they'd acted has always been a massive part of the music industry. Also, if you're trying to talk about image being more important than the actual music, that's also been going on since the beginning of the music industry, and you can find tons of examples of it. But having a visual aspect to your music isn't always a bad thing. With the rise of MTV and the internet and things like that, musicians have needed to have a stronger visual element to serve those different mediums. But at the same time, if you look at Beatlemania, it was kind of built on the same idea. Though in that case, the songs were really, really good. Now, in terms of when an image for an artist was used best, I kind of have to go with David Bowie in the 70s and all the different personas he created. I think in a lot of ways, it encompassed the idea of a musical artist in its truest form, and he really blended together so many different art forms. In more modern times, you have a group like the Flaming Lips, who are always trying to engage every single sense that they can at the same time, and I think they lead the way for the artsy sort of music. Now, in terms of should they or shouldn't they, I really think that's up to the performer in question and whether or not you want to buy it or buy into it. Just because an artist puts a visual out there doesn't mean you have to accept it for that song. Honestly, this is really why I stopped watching music videos, because it's a rare occasion when a musician can have the same idea that I have going on in my head, and that's kind of the beauty of music. Now, my last question asks what I think about bands who completely change their style, like Ministry or Husker Du or so many others. For me, it's always a very fine line on this sort of question, because a lot of times a band has just naturally progressed to a different point in their career, and their new sound is just musical maturity. I mean, most bands that last more than a few years are just gonna naturally start exploring new musical territory, and it's gonna at least somewhat change their overall musical approach. Now, this isn't always a bad thing. The bad thing happens when bands take really strange lefts and try and force some new sound into their sound. And it's when that happens that you hear the lovely term sellout start to get thrown around. To me, it's really the difference between Green Day and the Red Hot Chili Peppers, and I know it's insane that I would pick those two bands to single out, but they're gonna make my point. Anyone who watches this series regularly knows that I'm not a fan of either band in their current form, but Green Day have pretty much stuck to the exact same formula their entire career, and they sound the same way they did 20 years ago. The Chili Peppers, on the other hand, have gone down a musical road that is, to put it nicely, distant from their early records. Not to be nice about it, they left their musical balls somewhere about 15 years ago and started to make really lame pop songs. But we've spoken about that a ton of times before, and I think now you can see the difference I put between the two bands and the different ways that changing your sound can happen. In the end, it's all about the intent of the band. If it's a natural progression, then why not change your music up a little bit? But if you're just doing it to try and sell more albums, somebody needs to smack you and your bandmates in the head. So those are my questions for this time. If you have any musical questions for me, you can go ahead and email them to me at thedailyguru@gmail.com. You can follow me on Twitter and Facebook right here, and I'll see you guys again next time.